Good evening, everybody. This is Josh Coates with the VSGA staff. Just want to welcome everybody to our first ever virtual workshop of the VHSL staff and coaches. And we appreciate everybody taking the time out of their evening to spend with us, learning a little bit about the rules. First, we want to start by wishing everybody a safe and successful season. Hope everybody and your students and players have been safe throughout all of this, the last 10 months or so. We hope to see you all soon, and especially at the season-ending championships. So what we're going to do this evening is spend 60 to 90 minutes covering really an overview of the rules of golf, the basics, and some commonly used rules that I'm sure you and your players experience, such as relief procedures. Just to put it all into context, spending 60 to 90 minutes is just really scratching the surface, and we're going to do the best we can on covering a lot of content. But for the rules school that we go to, it's generally 3 days, 8 hours a day covering the rules word for word. So just a little bit of context of how much we'll be able to cover in just 60 to 90 minutes. But this evening we have Kent Hullabar. He's the VSGA manager of championships in junior golf, and as well as Amanda Braun, manager of championships in women's golf. They will be covering the content. I will be helping out with any questions that may come up. And on that note, we'll try to answer as many questions as we can. There'll be times throughout the presentation where we will entertain some questions, depending on the volume that come in. We may not get to all of them, but just be assured that one way or the other, we will get to your question. It may be a follow-up via email or phone call after the fact, but we welcome the questions, and just ask that you do keep these questions for this session just pertaining to the rules. If you have any administrative questions or questions for the VHSL office, please direct those to their office, and they can certainly help you as well. The way that we're going to submit questions is via the chat box. You should see a place where you can type in your question, and again, at those pauses in the presentation, we will entertain those questions. And again, just trying to keep it to 60 to 90 minutes. We'll see how they come in and how the questions go for the session tonight. But if you have questions that come up after the fact, you can always call or email us through our website, which is vsga.org, and then you select Learn, then Contact Us, and then there's a rules section where you can submit questions. They'll be directed towards the competition staff, and somebody will get back to you as quick as possible. And this goes not only for these sessions, but throughout the year. If you have any questions that come up, please feel free to submit those or give us a call in the office. So with all that being said, I will turn it over to Kent Hullabar, and he will get us started this evening.
All right, thanks, Josh, and thank you all for being here. Before I jump into the first slide and the first section, we weren't really sure if anyone would have a rules book from anything else that they've been involved in. There are 3 different books that are offered on the USGA website. There's a player's edition, which is much smaller, good for your golf bag, good for your back pocket. It speaks more to the player. And then in blue writing, it tends to send you to maybe look up more information. The next book is the official guide, kind of has some more in-depth things. It doesn't really send you too many other places. And then it has a different book which has more interpretations to it. I guess that's the official guide, but really a good other resource would be either the website if you're just in front of a computer and have a question, or even the Rules of Golf app that they have. It's always being updated, so I would definitely download that. We'll do our best to explain each slide. There will be videos at the end to help clarify anything. And also, if you look in your side panel there, there's a handout section which has 15 rules that golfers should know. It's just small little infographics. We'll make sure that the high school office has that, and we will email them anything else that we feel like you all should have. But let's go ahead and see if we can get into this. Oops, sorry about that. All right, so we've got definitions, a few here. You can find those in the back of each of the books. So if you have that, I might reference a few page numbers that would just be to the player's edition. So again, if you have that book, feel free to pull it out. But these definitions were added in 2019 when the rules were revamped. The few definitions that stick out to me that I think will pertain to my section, and Amanda might have some that pertain to hers, will be the reference point and the relief area. Occasionally there might be an internal definition, which you will not find in the back of the book, such as the word damage. Like, what does damage to a putting green mean? So you won't find that in the back, but it'll just kind of pop up in the middle of the book. Next, we've got some modified definitions. Maybe they're renamed. So sometimes it could be a little bit of a learning curve from how you used to pronounce things to now, well, what we know them as. What we know now is on the left column in more of the bold writing, and what it used to be is in the grayed out column over there. So we've got penalty area, which we used to call water hazards, and we have general area, which used to be called through the green. We'll do our best not to mention any of the old terminology as to not confuse anyone, but if we do mention it, it's more or less just to kind of drive home a point. The whole revamped rules has been nice where they've added pictures here. I happen to be a virtual or a visual learner, so this is really nice for me. But if you're trying to navigate the rule book, it's really nice to know where your ball lies. So this is broken down into about 5 areas. So the first one is the teen area of the hole being played. We've got bunkers on this particular hole. We have 2. We've got a penalty area. We don't have any yellow penalty areas, but we have red, and we'll jump into that later in the section. We have the putting green of the hole being played, and then everything else is general area. So why did I mention the hole being played? So if I'm teeing off and this is hole number 5, and maybe I shank it into an adjacent hole, hole number 13, well, that teen area is now up hole 13 is in the general area. It's not the hole I'm playing, so we'll have different things that I can do over there. And then if I shank it on a different hole and it's on a different putting green, well, that's a wrong green, and there's a relief procedure that we can go through with that. Any quick questions before we move on, Josh?
Nope, we're good to go.
All right. Jump into some dropping and then redropping if we need to procedures. All right, we've got 5 things here that are highlighted in yellow, but basically 3 points. So the player, I emphasize player, must drop the ball. Must be dropped straight down, so no little slight tosses, no little spins to ensure that you're getting the ball in the right area, in the area that you want. Because honestly, with the rules changing and dropping the ball used to be from shoulder height and is now is knee height, your ball really shouldn't move that much at all. So where you're aiming the ball, where you want to drop it, really should be where it ends up. If it bounces maybe a couple inches. When the ball is dropped, it must not touch the player or the player's equipment before striking the ground. And it must first strike a part of the course within the relief area, which you can see here is the shaded area, that tan area. All right, some simplified dropping procedures. The ball must be dropped straight down, like we said, knee height without touching the player or equipment. So what does knee height mean? The height of the player's knee when in a standing position. So got a few good examples of this, a few pictures pulled straight from the rule book there, and then a picture of a player in the white shirt, which you can see is from a kneeling position, but clearly holding the ball above his knee. So now you can see that those yellow lines would indicate where his knee would be in a standing position. All right, the ball must be dropped within the relief area, like I mentioned before, but the player can really stand wherever they want when dropping the ball inside the relief area. Here's a picture of the ball on a sprinkler head. Player's going to be taking relief from this. We see 3 tees. Could be kind of difficult to see, but we got one in the middle here. We've got one off to the one side and one off to the other. And what this is showing us, which we'll go through in a little bit, is basically the semicircle where the player is going to be dropped. So we need it to drop in the right way, and we need that ball to land in and come to rest within this relief area. So you can look in the back of the book for the actual definition of the relief area. It requires the player to use that specific area, and the size and the location are based off of 3 factors. So what we're going to touch on in a little bit are abnormal course conditions, which requires nearest point of relief, or we'll do penalty areas. But each and every time that we take relief, we're going to need to find a reference point. And it's always good to go ahead and put that tee down to choose that reference point. The size of that relief area is then going to be determined kind of under what rule we're proceeding under. So if we're going with abnormal course conditions and ground under repair, we're going to go with 1 club length. But if we're proceeding under a penalty area with the red penalty area and laterally, we're going to go with 2 club lengths. And we'll get to that a little bit. But there are limitations on the location of the relief area. It has to be remain in a defined area, so like the general area if that's where you're taking it, or bunker. It can't be any nearer the hole than the reference point or outside that certain area. It is where there is no interference from where relief is being taken. So if I'm taking relief from a cart path, I have to take full relief, and I can't have my feet still on the cart path. So we have to make sure that we're proceeding all the way away from that cart path. A little change with how we can, or what is measured when taking relief. I think we know that the player can have 14 or fewer clubs, but the rules are now telling us that to measure our relief area, we need to use the longest club in our bag. So in this set shown here, it looks like it's the driver, but there's more and more players that are using a long putter these days, but the rules are going to tell us that we cannot use a long putter. It has to be the longest club in our bag. So I'm going to say 99.9% of the time, it's going to be our driver. So as we know from earlier, the player has to do certain things to get that ball back in play when taking relief. The player must drop it straight down from knee height without first touching the player or equipment, and must be dropped inside and come to rest in the relief area. Again, that shaded area that's shown. So in this example, the ball has hit the ground within the relief area, but it's bounced out. The player needs to drop it again, but the player will have the ability to choose a different area within that shaded area to drop the ball again. Players drop it a second time, but again, it's bounced outside the relief area. So just like the rules were in the past before they were revamped, if it goes outside the desired area first, redrop, goes outside again, and then we're going to place the ball when dropped the second time. So she's determined that she was going to drop it in the same place, so we're just going to go ahead and drop it right there where it hit the ground the second time within the relief area. A good change here is that all drops permit substitution, whether that be free relief or any penalty relief. I think our next slide is going to lead us into a video that kind of recaps all the dropping and redropping. So hopefully, if you have any questions after that, we can touch on those. I'll have Amanda start that video for me.
When dropping your ball under the new rules, the likelihood you will need only one drop will increase, while the randomness of your resulting lie will be preserved. The procedure is simple. Hold the ball at knee height, let go of it so it falls straight down, and make sure that it lands and comes to rest in the relief area. Don't throw, roll, or spin the ball, and don't let it hit you as it falls.
When dropping and taking free relief or penalty relief, Your ball must be dropped in the defined relief area, and it must come to rest in there too. Most of the time, with the knee-height dropping procedure, that will happen on your first drop. When it doesn't, drop a second time. If that drop doesn't stay within the relief area either, place a ball where your second drop first touched the ground.
All right. Let's see here. Any questions on that section?
We do have one good question that was submitted, and it was, I guess it was referring to a picture on one of the slides. Was that drop from the squatting position legal? And
Okay.
the position of your body or the player's body is really irrelevant. The key thing to make sure that is achieved is that the drop comes from that player's knee height while standing. So even though the player might be squatting and has lowered their knee height by squatting, remember it's knee height while standing. So they would be dropping it from slightly higher than their knee height while crouching. So I hope that answers that question. It's a good question submitted. And that was the only one.
All right. Cool. Let's
go on. We just had one more submitted.
Okay.
What if you accidentally drop from your shoulder? Can you redrop the correct way? And the answer is yes, and you actually must correct that error. If you don't, then there'll be additional penalties. So if you don't address all the prerequisites, so in the relief area from knee height, etc., then that does not count as a drop. It's a do-over. So you have the opportunity, and you must correct that mistake, and you get as many times as it takes to correct that mistake. So let's say you drop from shoulder height one time and you're trying to correct it, and then you drop and it first hits a part of the course outside the relief area. Well, none of those drops count, and you have to keep going until you get it right. Once you get it right, then we go to the redrop scenario where it rolls out of the relief area, you redrop again, and if it does it again, since those two drops counted, now you're going to place it where it hit the part of the course in that relief area the second time.
All right. Let's move on to some abnormal course conditions. All right, got some pictures to hopefully help clarify, but abnormal course conditions are any of these things: animal holes, ground under repair, immovable obstructions, or temporary water. So first picture on the left, you can see ball is on the cart path or some artificial surface there. Middle picture, temporary water accumulating on a hole, probably in the fairway or the rough area. And picture on the right, an area that the superintendent is repairing, and it's got some white paint around that, so some ground under repair. All right, so how do you get relief from each of these areas? What has to happen? Interference from an abnormal course condition exists when your ball touches or is in or on the abnormal course condition. An abnormal course condition physically interferes with your area of intended stance or intended swing, or your ball is on the putting green and an abnormal course condition on or off the putting green intervenes on your line of play. So picture on the left, ball lies on an immovable obstruction. So I mentioned cart path earlier, but it could be this sprinkler head. Middle picture, the player's stance has interference from an immovable obstruction. So same thing with the sprinkler head or the cart path. I mentioned having to get your feet off the cart path. So if my ball lies off that cart path, I could hit it if I wanted to, but if I'm going to take relief, I'm going to have to take full relief and make sure my stance is no longer interfering. And then the picture on the right, temporary water on the putting green that might intervene on my line of play. So I could definitely get relief from that. I wouldn't have to putt through that water that's on the edge of the green there. All right, relief from an abnormal course condition is not always allowed. So it's not going to be allowed when your ball is in the penalty area or the abnormal course condition is out of bounds, or if it's clearly unreasonable to play the ball because of something other than your abnormal course condition, or because you choose a club, the type of stance, swing, or direction that is clearly unreasonable. So top picture here, you can see that ball is inside that yellow penalty area up against that concrete wall. No relief is going to be granted there. And then we actually have Josh here trying to make a swing at this ball. It looks like it's near a bush, but his stance is awfully wide. I mean, he's stretching a little bit to try to convince the rules official that he is on the cart path and going to get relief. But because he's choosing a stance that is just unreasonable, he's not going to get relief from that either. So good try, Josh. All right, so how do we take relief? This is in the player's edition of the Rules of Golf. It happens to be on page 95. So again, if you have that, feel free to turn to that page. I should point out though, with ground under repair, you don't always have to take relief. In this example, it looks like it's a pretty nasty area. It could be a lot of mud, so I would want to take relief. But it could be a bunch of just splotchy, muddy areas, and inside those areas are perfectly green grass. My ball could be sitting up, and just because it's circled in white paint doesn't mean I'm required to take relief. So I want to just throw that out there as a little bit of things to look out for. But first, what we need to do is find our nearest point of relief. Nearest point of complete relief, I should say, that's not close to the hole. So in this case, it's right behind this ground under repair. You can place the tee down right here to signify the reference point, and then we can measure our club lengths. So longest club in the bag again, going right, going left. You can even go behind just to see how far back you need to go. Can't be your long putter once again. In this case, with this ground and repair, it's only going to be one club length. And finally, drop the ball in the correct way as we described earlier, from knee height, drop it straight down so the ball lands in and comes to rest in the relief area. All right, now we'll touch on a video with abnormal course conditions, see if we can clear up any confusion.
The two fundamental principles of golf are play the ball as it lies and play the course as you find it. But to make the game more fair, you aren't required to play from ground under repair, temporary water, animal holes, or immovable obstructions such as cart paths and sprinkler heads. These are known as abnormal course conditions. If you want to play your ball as it lies, go right ahead, but you are allowed to take relief without penalty. Here's how. First, you need to determine the nearest spot, no closer to the hole, where the abnormal course condition is no longer in your way. It's helpful to mark that spot with a T. Then, determine the area within one club length, no closer to the hole. Drop your ball and play on.
Yeah, I think that that probably helped clear up anything. Josh, any questions with that section?
Just one so far, and it was a question about abnormal course conditions and does a fence count? And the answer is it depends. If it's an out of bounds or fence that defines out of bounds, that is not an immovable obstruction or an abnormal course condition, and you do not get free relief. You can always take an unplayable from that boundary fence. But if it's not, let's say it's a fence that is adjacent to a cart path, then that would be an abnormal course condition, and you would get free relief from that as outlined by the presentation. Another question that just came in asking about tree roots, and tree roots in themselves are not an abnormal course condition under extenuating circumstance. If there happens to be in the fairway or something that's not normal, then we or the committee could mark them as ground under repair. But if they're just tree roots surrounding a tree that's growing, then that'll be addressed later on in the unplayable ball and that relief procedure. There are some some courses or tournaments that play a route rule that is not exactly under the rules. We would not advise to implement that rule, but we do know some people do it. But if it's a championship event and you're in a situation where you have interference by a tree root, more times than not, that shot is one that has gone awry, and you have to either play it or take relief using an applicable rule. But tree roots in themselves are not an abnormal course condition.
Yeah, pretty good question there. All right, let's move on to penalty areas, not water hazards, penalty areas. All right, so I think we all have a general idea of what is a penalty area. It can include, you know, the ocean that's off to the left out at Pebble Beach. It could be any lake, pond, river, ditch, or really any area that the committee wants to define as a penalty area. One of the new changes back in 2019 was that the committee, the golf course, the pro shop, or the VSGA can decide what they want to make a penalty area. So you might have seen in the last year or so a bunch of just tree lines that is now marked red. So you previously would have thought, oh man, I don't see any water down there, that can't be a penalty area, but now it is. And it's kind of there just to speed up play. So, and I would say in most VSGA championships, you're going to see these stakes and you're going to see the lines. And if the kids play in any of our junior golf circuit events or really any high school matches, I'm not too confident that you're going to see any lines out there. You might, but I'd say you're most likely just going to see the stakes out there to signal that you've got a penalty area up here, and then you can proceed by that rule. But there are some good changes that have happened when your ball is inside a penalty area. Revamped rules really allow us to play the ball as if it were already in the general area. So there's a bunch of things that we can do now that we never were able to do. It's okay to move these loose impediments. You saw the leaf on the previous screen. I can take practice swings. I can ground my club now. I can even touch the water. So a bunch of good changes there. You can still play the ball as it lies, but if you want to take relief, you can go ahead and do that too. So as we all probably know, we have two types of penalty areas. We have yellow and we have red. In either case, like I said before, we can go ahead and play the ball if we want to, but we could also take relief. So starting off with yellow penalty areas, marked with yellow lines, yellow stakes, and it gives the players two options. And in parentheses there, you see the rules that are referenced. In red penalty areas, marked with red lines and red stakes, gives the player an extra relief option though. It is in addition to the two relief options given with the yellow, and we'll get into that in just a second. So let's jump into one of those relief options that goes for both yellow and red, which is stroke and distance. This could be back to the tee, as shown here in the first picture. It could be back to the fairway or the bunker or rough. Really, it's where the previous shot was taken, or even in probably a more rare case, back to the putting green. But nonetheless, stroke and distance just means go back to where you previously hit the shot. All right, another relief option here. This again applies for both yellow and red. We are going to drop the ball back in line with the flag. So really what we're trying to do here is connect the dots. We're going to take the flag stick, that's our first dot, and we're going to take where the ball last crossed the edge of the penalty area, and that's our next dot. And then we're going to choose our reference point. And I can go as far back as I want to go. You know, I don't know how far this distance is for her, but maybe her bread and butter shot is 100 yards. So she can go back to 100 yards, stick the tee in the ground, measure her club length, and then her club length side to side, and then go ahead and drop the ball within that relief area. And then here's our extra one that only applies to a red penalty area. This person has determined their reference point here from the area that it last crossed the edge of the penalty area. It's measured those two club lengths and is going to drop the ball within the shaded area. There you go. So we haven't really laid out our club lengths in this example, but kind of just use your imagination that has that driver in his hand and he's gone ahead and measured those 2 club lengths, no nearer the hole. Could be parallel to the hole just as long as it's no closer. You're going to find this picture in your rule book also, page 106, and it really just breaks down all of our options all over again. So we've got our red penalty area here, and looks like she has hit her ball and it's last crossed the edge of the penalty area at point X. So if we're going to proceed under the first option, stroke and distance, we're coming back to the tee. If we're going under option number 2, we're connecting the dots, we're going back in line with the flag, and you can see this person wanted to stop here, but we can go all the way back as far as we want to go. Or option 3 and go parallel to the hole, go back to the penalty area, and we can drop anywhere in that shaded area there. I think it's a pretty good graphic to lay everything out. Let's again end with a video of this section, see if we can clarify anything.
Penalty areas include any body of water on the course plus any other areas that have been marked. If you happen to find your ball in a penalty area, you can play your ball as it lies, if possible to do so. Before playing the stroke, it's okay to ground your club, take practice swings that touch the ground, and move loose impediments. Penalty areas can be marked either red or yellow, and for one penalty stroke, you have several relief options. The first one is to play a ball under stroke and distance from where you made your last stroke. Another option is to take back on the line relief by imagining a straight line from the hole through the spot where your ball last crossed into the penalty area. Choose a spot on that line, then drop and play from within 1 club length of it, not nearer the hole. You do have a third relief option if your ball is in a red penalty area that allows you to find the spot where your ball last crossed into the penalty area and drop a ball within 2 club lengths of that spot, no closer to the hole. Also, there may be an area marked as a drop zone that could be available as an additional option.
All right. Any questions to wrap up the penalty area section?
I just had one submitted about dropping a ball further back than where you hit the last shot when you're in the penalty area. So if you're in a yellow penalty area, it says you can go back on the line with no limit to how far back. So yes, you could go back further than actually where you last played from. So it could be a little bit strategic to get back to the fairway or get back to a yardage that you're more comfortable with. So you can certainly do that for yellow in that case. And then there's another question. If you choose to drop, but see there's a drop zone. So a dropping zone is something that we commonly use if it just makes sense to speed play up or to get players going to a common spot, generally on par 3s or where there's a long force carry. But that would be an additional option to the ones that were just discussed. So if there are no local rules in place, then you cannot use the dropping zone, even if there's a sign there. So if you're playing in a tournament and you just happen to see a sign that says drop zone, but be sure that it's in the local rule sheet that dropping zone is in play for that competition. We just had another one about out of bounds. Out of bounds is defined the same way as it was before, and it could be with various ways of doing it, such as stakes, fence posts, roads, things like that. So no real change to how we define out of bounds, but just could use different methods or different tools to do so. Another question came in. If you've already dropped and played the shot and then you see the drop zone, well, you've already decided what you're going to do and you've made that stroke, so that option is no longer available. And then another question, they're rolling in now pretty steady. If a ball enters a penalty area and then player hits a provisional ball, we'll save that one for afterwards. That we're getting into a little bit complicated situation there. So we'll Jason, we'll get back to you on that one. Okay, another one just came in about grounding your club when we're playing from a penalty area. Yes, so the old rules, previous edition, you cannot ground your club in the penalty area. Now you can. So think of penalty areas this way. They're only marked so that way you can take relief from them. If you're going to play from them, you have the same permissions and same restrictions as you would if your ball was lying in the middle of the fairway. So you can ground your club, move loose impediments, but just remember you can't move your ball, improve your lie, etc. So just to reiterate that.
Yeah, I think that's also an area where people used to call hazards and encompass bunkers within that too. So yeah, you can now ground your club in a penalty area, so inside that red or yellow line, but you still cannot ground your club in a bunker.
All right.
Before we move on,
we're going to move on to unplayable ball. So Josh mentioned this a little bit, but this is a rule that you can use almost anywhere on the golf course. We'll see where you cannot use it in a minute. But it's basically the rule that you can follow if no other rules apply. So you see here, you can call unplayable ball or use unplayable ball relief in the general area. So if you're in the fairway, in the rough, in a wooded area, something that's not marked as something else. You can use it in a bunker, in the teeing area if you wanted to, on the putting green, but the only place you cannot play under the unplayable ball rule is in the penalty area. The reason being the penalty area has its own relief options. So if you were in a penalty area, you would just use those relief options as opposed to the unplayable ball rule. And the only person who can decide if the ball is unplayable is the player themselves. Unlike the name, it does not mean the player cannot physically play the ball. It could be a shot that they could easily make. They just choose not to and wanted to play use the relief option to play the ball in a different way. So these relief options, there are 3, and they look very similar to what we just discussed with penalty areas, but there are a few minor differences. So the first one is stroke and distance relief. As we saw when Kent was describing relief under penalty area rule, it's the same thing. Go back to where you last played from. That spot becomes your reference point, and you get 1 club length left, right, and behind, and you can drop that ball anywhere in that area. Stroke and distance relief is the one thing you can do at any point throughout the round. Nothing's going to prevent you from using the stroke and distance rule. Your second option under unplayable is back on the line. Again, this should look very familiar, but unlike the penalty area, the reference point becomes where the ball physically lies. So you see here, this person, kind of a bad picture because they're taking relief from a bunker, which we will describe. But let's pretend that maybe their ball is in a divot that they didn't want to play and they want to basically drop the ball right behind it. So you would take the point where the ball was unplayable, line it up with the flag stick, and then pick a spot on that line and go as far back as you want. And then again, you get the 1 club length left, right, and behind that reference point to become your relief area. And then the third option here you see is the lateral relief option. Again, a little bit different. Your reference point again is where the ball lies. So in this case, we see Josh again. He's stuck behind a bush and he doesn't want to play that ball because he knows it's not going to go anywhere. So where that ball lies becomes the reference point. You get 1 club length left, right, and behind, and you drop that ball in that relief area. The one thing I would caution you as coaches when you have your players who are wanting to apply this rule, make sure you measure your relief area because it might not always get you out of what you're trying to get relief from. So for instance, if you're in a very, very thick wooded area and the ball is very, very deep in there, chances are 2 club lengths are not going to get you out. And if it's depending on where the wooded area is in relation to the hole, your back on line relief might not be an option either. So your only option would be to go back where you last played from. And all of these options are 1 penalty stroke. So we see here, this talks more about a playable ball within a bunker, but it does describe the 3 options we just went over. So if your ball is in a bunker, you can use the unplayable ball rule, since the only place we cannot use this rule is a penalty area. So let's go through what it would look like if for some reason a player wanted to take relief in a bunker. So again, the first option you see up here is stroke and distance. So just go back to where you last played from. Your second option, back on the line. But the thing about back on the line within a bunker is the ball needs to stay in the bunker. So in this case, the ball was embedded, it looks like up here on the face. And so back on the line, you have a lot of room to work with. Let's say if the ball was embedded farther back in the bunker, you might have a little less real estate to work with. Your third option is your lateral relief. So we see here, it's where that ball lies. You get your 2 club lengths left and right. It looks like up here, you kind of lose part of a club length because you need to keep the ball in the bunker. So even though the 2 club lengths looks like it could get you on this little piece of grass, this rule does say if you're taking unplayable ball in a bunker, it needs to stay in the bunker. So that's why the shaded area isn't a perfect half circle. And they did add a 4th option for an unplayable ball in a bunker. You see it here. It gets you out of the bunker. So for an additional penalty stroke, so now we're talking about 2 penalty strokes, you can take back on the line relief to get out of the bunker. This might be a good option again if your ball is towards the back of the bunker. You might not have a lot of sand in order to find relief. So this might be a time that you want to take that extra penalty stroke. But remember, you can still go out of the bunker with 1 penalty stroke by going stroke and distance. So this is just an additional option for you. The only way you're getting out of the bunker again is stroke and distance for 1 penalty stroke or back on the line for 2. This lateral relief option is not an option for 2 penalty strokes to get out. It's only back on the line. All right, and we have a video to kind of explain all of that again, and that way you'll see what relief options they have.
Sometimes your ball ends up in a place where it is impossible or difficult to play from. Only you can decide if your ball is unplayable. You can make that decision anywhere on the course except for one, when your ball is in a penalty area, where the penalty area rule applies. When deciding a ball is unplayable, you have 3 relief options, but all come with a 1-stroke penalty. The most frequently used option is to drop within 2 club lengths of the ball, but no closer to the hole. The second option is to imagine a straight line from the hole through the location of the unplayable ball. Choose a spot on that line behind your ball, then drop and play from within 1 club length of it, not nearer the hole. And the least frequently used option is stroke and distance, which means you can go back to the spot where you last played.
All right. Do we have any questions, Josh?
None that we'll address right now. We may circle back to a couple of them.
Okay. All right. So the next section we're going to talk about are bunkers. So with bunkers, there are certain things you can and cannot do when a player's ball is in a bunker. You see here, you are now allowed to remove loose impediments and movable obstructions. So loose impediments are natural objects such as leaves, stones, twigs, etc. So those you can go ahead and move, as well as movable obstructions, which are other things that can easily be moved. For example, rakes, maybe there's candy wrappers or cracker wrappers that get thrown in bunkers sometimes. Those are movable obstructions, and you are allowed to move those. When you are removing loose impediments or movable obstructions, you are allowed to reasonably touch the sand without penalty. If you do this though with loose impediments, if you choose to move a loose impediment in the bunker, be very careful not to cause your ball to move, or else you will get a penalty. So with this, you see she's picking up leaves that may be lying around her ball. If there was one stuck right under her ball, if she caused her ball to move, she would get a 1-stroke penalty and she must replace the ball. And this doesn't go just for bunkers. This is when you're removing loose impediments anywhere on the course. So if you do want to move loose impediments, again, we now know it's okay to do that in bunkers, in penalty areas, and of course in any other area of the course that you want to. Just be very careful not to cause the ball to move. However, when you're trying to remove a movable obstruction, for instance, the most common one I think you would see is maybe someone leaves a rake in the bunker and a player's ball is resting up against the rake. You are allowed to move the rake, and if your ball moves, that's okay. There's no penalty for if your ball moves when removing movable obstructions. It's not required to mark the spot of your ball before you move a movable obstruction. I would say it's highly encouraged, just in case if it does move, you can know where it was and replace it. And then we have restrictions on touching sand in the bunkers. So some of these might look familiar to you from before when the rules changed in 2019, but there are still penalties assigned if you try to test the condition of the sand, either with your club, a hand, a rake, or any other object. Maybe they want to try to feel how wet it is. You're not allowed to touch it or like stick anything in the sand to get an idea of how it's going to play. The other restriction we have is touching the sand with a club either right behind or in front of your ball. So you can't ground your club in a bunker or in front of the ball for whatever reason. You still cannot make practice swings in a bunker, and you still can't touch the sand when going back in a backstroke for the stroke you're going to make. So these are all things that are still not allowed in a bunker. But on the plus side, there are more things we can do that are not going to give us a penalty if our ball is in a bunker. For instance, digging in with your feet to take a stance, that's always okay as long as you're not building a stance. You can smooth to care for the course. Go ahead and place equipment in the bunker. You can bring your whole bag in with you. If you bring in a couple clubs, you can throw one to the side. There's no penalty if your equipment touches the sand. You can measure, mark, lift, or replace, and if you touch the sand for those reasons, you're okay. If you're taking any action under a rule, if you're leaning on a club, maybe you're waiting for someone else to play, that's fine. You can lean on a club now if you want to. And it's not against the rules to strike the sand in frustration or anger. While it may not be a penalty under this rule, it could be a penalty under a code of conduct. So I would advise you not to strike the sand in frustration or anger, but you will not get a penalty under the bunker rule. Once your ball is outside the bunker, go ahead and do anything you want. There's no restrictions for touching the sand. Go ahead, smooth the sand to care for the course. I guess that's highly encouraged to do once you play out of a bunker. And this is true even if you decide to take stroke and distance to go back into the bunker. You can go ahead and smooth that area before you take that relief. And it's okay to improve the area that's now on your intended line of play. If you've played out of the bunker. So for instance here, maybe the bunker wall's too high and you can't get over it. So the player decides to play backwards and now they smooth that area, but it's on their line of play to the green. That's okay. That's allowed under the rules. All right, and we'll watch a quick video here on bunkers.
Everybody has spent time at the beach, and while it can be enjoyable, on the golf course, most players prefer to avoid these specially prepared areas of sand called bunkers. If you happen to find yourself in a bunker, make sure you don't deliberately touch the sand to test its consistency, such as with your hand, a rake, or a club. Also, don't touch the sand behind or in front of the ball or during a practice swing, even if by accident. The good news is you can move loose impediments and movable obstructions, and even touch the sand with your club elsewhere in the bunker, as long as it is not to test the condition.
All right, any questions we have about bunkers before we move on?
Yes, a couple of them are coming in. Are you allowed to touch the sand with a club during practice swings if it's done well away from the ball position? No, you cannot do that in the bunker. So it's not like a penalty area. You still have a lot of restrictions when the ball is in a bunker and you're making a stroke from the bunker. If a player has a lot of difficulty hitting out of a bunker, can they consider any shot in the bunker as unplayable? Yes, you can use the unplayable ball rule at any time. So you can use any of the options under the unplayable, including stroke and distance. If you really don't want to hit that shot out of the bunker, you can always go back stroke and distance or use one of the other unplayable ball options under that rule. That's it right now, Amanda.
Perfect. All right, we'll go into our next section of putting greens. And again, the putting green is a very special place on the golf course, and players can do things on the putting green that they cannot normally do on the golf course, and we'll see what some of those things are here in these slides. So some actions that you are allowed to do while on the putting green include marking and lifting your ball. It's one of the only places you can go ahead and do that freely. You can clean your ball anytime your ball's on the putting green, and you can remove sand and loose soil. So removing sand and loose soil, you can do that anytime as long as the sand and loose soil lie on the putting green. The ball does not need to be on the putting green in order for you to smooth sand away. So you might see sometimes if a player is just off the green, which is technically in the general area, they might go up and smooth some of the sand away if they're going to putt through it, and that's perfectly fine as long as that sand and loose soil is on the putting green itself. Another thing that players are allowed to do on the putting green is repair damage. As Kent mentioned earlier, damage is an internal definition, so it's one you'll find within the putting green rule itself. It will not be listed in the back of the book with the rest of the definitions. And again, similar to removing sand and loose soil, you can go repair damage on the putting green, even if your ball lies off of it. And the player can use their hand, foot, a divot repair tool, a tee, or something similar to repair damage, but they need to do it without delaying play. So again, let's look at some of the things that are considered damage within the rules of golf, and these are things that players are allowed to fix while on the putting green. So if a player or outside influence leaves a ball mark, go ahead and fix it. If there's shoe damage, I know sometimes if a player's dragging their feet, they might leave scrapings behind. That's allowed to be fixed. Any scrapes and indentations are allowed to be fixed. Old hole plugs and turf plugs, if they're maybe not perfectly level, you can go ahead and make them even. Seams of cut turf, same thing. Animal tracks and indentations. So when deer run across greens in the morning or late afternoon, they might leave their hoof marks in the greens. So those are allowed to be fixed, as well as embedded objects. So maybe there's stones or acorns that might be pushed into the putting green. Those objects can be dug out and then you can fix that hole as well. So these are all things that a player can now fix on the putting green. However, there are some things that are not considered damage and you cannot fix on the putting green. So anything that's caused from normal maintenance practices, whether it's aeration holes or maybe there's vertical mowing grooves, those things you just have to leave alone. You're not allowed to fix those in any way. Same with effects of irrigation, rain, or other natural forces. You just have to let that be. Any natural surface imperfections, these might be more diseased areas on the court, on the putting green. Those you just have to putt over. You can't fix them in any way. And natural wear of the hole. So as the day goes on, maybe the hole gets a little rough around the edges. That's just the way it is, and that's something the players have to deal with. You're not allowed to go ahead and fix the hole for any reason. Other actions that are not allowed while on the putting green include deliberate testing, either by rubbing the surface, maybe to feel how soft or hard the green is, or by rolling a ball. And this applies on a wrong green as well. So if there's two greens side by side, you can't run over to the other one real quick to throw a ball and see how it's going to roll. Still does not allowed in the rules of golf. And you can't do this while play is stopped. However, you do see that little asterisk there, which means there is an exception to this rule. And that exception is between the play of two holes. So once everyone putts out, then it's okay to go ahead and rub the surface, or maybe you see players sometimes re-putt something they just missed, and that's okay. That's the only exception to this rule. All right, now we're gonna get into what happens if your ball or ball marker move on the green, and we're gonna start off with if the player themselves cause the movement. So this rule, we all see Dustin Johnson there. I was kind of created for him a couple years ago, but there is no penalty for accidental movement of the ball or ball marker on the putting green. Now I stress on the putting green because, again, as I mentioned, this is a sacred place on the course, and this is the only place where you're not going to get penalized for accidentally moving your ball. So don't get this confused with if you're walking down the fairway and accidentally kick your ball. That's still a penalty, and you'll get a one-stroke penalty and have to replace it. However, once you get to the putting green, you get a little bit more leeway, and accidental movement is okay. Maybe a player drops something on their ball and it moves. Maybe they kick it by accident. No problem. You just replace the ball where it was. And if you weren't sure where the ball was, you would just estimate that spot. And again, we have this little asterisk here. There is an exception, and that exception is just saying that if the player begins to make their stroke, so that means forward movement, or within their backswing, and the stroke is completed, you would not go ahead and redo that. That stroke counts, and you would just play the ball where it lies if it doesn't go in the hole. Now what happens if your ball is moved by natural forces on the putting green? This could maybe be wind, rain, or any type of water that might be on the putting green, or even gravity. So what you would do depends on whether you mark the ball or not. So if you lift your ball, you mark it, lift it, and replace it, and then the big gust of wind comes and your ball moves, you're gonna put that ball back. Think about it as if you mark that ball, you own that spot. So if that ball moves for any reason after you've marked it, you're always going to put it back. The other side of that is if you haven't marked that ball and then it moves, you're gonna play it from its new spot, whether it's better, maybe it rolls into the hole, or for worse, maybe it rolls off the green. So again, with that same logic, if you don't get to that ball in time and you don't mark it, well then, unfortunately, you're gonna have to play that ball from wherever it ends up. So for example, let's say you have a green that has a super steep slope on it. A player hits their shot up onto the higher end of the slope. Let's say they run up to the ball and mark it. Great. They've placed that ball back down and it won't stay. It keeps moving, keeps moving. Since they marked that ball. They own that spot, so they're going to try to replace that ball. If they can't get that ball to replace, well, then we're going to start working around and try to find a spot that's near the original spot to try to find a spot where it will stay. But same player hits that shot, it lands on the top of that slope. That player is not fast enough and it starts to move because of gravity. Well, that player is going to play that ball from wherever it ends up. Maybe it's in the hole and he's done, or maybe it's off the green and he has to chip again. And if a ball marker gets moved by natural forces, you treat it as if you marked it since you did. You're always going to put it back. So ball marker, if it ends up moving, maybe it's a really large ball marker and it gets blown by the wind, you're always going to put that ball marker back. Now we're going to talk about the flag stick real quickly here. And we all know that the players are allowed to leave the flag stick in the hole now. So that's allowed anywhere, and a player can make a stroke from anywhere, leaving the flag stick in the hole, whether for whatever reason. If they think it helps them, that's fine, no problem there. But what happens if your ball strikes the flag stick? There's going to be no penalty. So there's no penalty if the ball strikes the flag stick, whether it's left in the hole. You're just going to play the ball as it lies. And this also is true if, let's say, the group decides to take the flag stick out and they put it in a spot where they don't think anyone's going to be able to hit it there, and then someone does. If they accidentally hit the flag stick in that way, this same rule applies. There's no penalty if your ball strikes the flag stick accidentally, and they'll just play their ball from where it lies. So it's okay to hit the flag stick again, whether it's left in the hole or whether it's lying on the side where, again, you didn't think anyone was going to get it there, and then someone does. No problem, no penalty, just play the ball as it lies. And then the last thing about the flag stick we'll touch on here is restrictions. So you see the flag sticks leaning a little bit to the left in this picture. You are not allowed to deliberately position the flag stick other than centered. So if the group or if a player decides to leave the flag stick in the hole, they have to keep it at the centered position. They can't lean it to one way or the other to prevent the ball from bouncing out. Right, we have our putting green video for you.
The rules allow many special permissions on the putting green that you don't get anywhere else. Marking, lifting, and cleaning your ball on the green is always permitted. And while you cannot repair aeration holes, natural surface imperfection, or any normal wear on the green, there's lots you can do. It's okay to repair most damage, such as ball marks, old hole plugs, spike marks, and anything caused by shoes, animals, or maintenance practices. All of those fixes must be done promptly and not improve your line of play beyond the repair. The green is also the only place on the course where you can remove sand and loose soil, and touching the green to point where you expect to aim or putt is also permitted.
All right. Josh, do you want to answer some questions?
Yeah, we had a few submitted. First one, can a player mark their ball with a tee on the green, and is there a penalty if the putt hits it? And yes, you can mark it with a tee. If a putt hits it, then it's no penalty to anybody, and play the ball as it lies. So, you know, something like that, not recommended for cases where it could be struck, but wouldn't be any penalty if it were. Aeration pellets, so you know the plugs removed by the maintenance practice of aerating, if those are left on the course, those would be loose impediments. So you can move them just like a leaf or a twig. They'd have the same status as a loose impediment, or they are loose impediments. Next, can loose impediments be on the green be removed by sweeping a glove or a hat? And yes, you can actually use any method that you choose to remove loose impediments. And if you're remember, if the ball's on the green and it's accidental and moving the ball when moving loose impediments, then you just replace the ball. But you can use anything at your disposal to remove those loose impediments. But with that being said, keep in mind any pace of play requirements. So you can't take all day and removing every little tiny leaf on the green if it happens to be in the fall. Just do the best you can, and but you can use anything. Next, can a ball be cleaned by rubbing it on the putting green? Yes, as long as you're not purposely doing it to gain any knowledge or testing of the surface. It's just the traditional way of cleaning the ball, and it is allowed with those restrictions. If a ball on the putting green is moved by a player with the putter during a dress, can it be called accidental? Yes, probably 100% of the time the player would say yes, it's an accident, and even if it wasn't, then you got to know how to answer a question sometimes to make it that way. But yeah, the rule was implemented to just as a common sense. If you hit a ball just a couple inches by mistake when addressing it, it's just you haven't gained any advantage over any player. You just put it back, and there's no penalty. That's it for now, Amanda.
Perfect. Well, we have one more major section here, and it's just kind of a bunch of other major rules that are helpful, that should be helpful for you with your season. So we'll go through what some of these look like. So one of the ideas of the rules change in 2019, one of the main themes was promoting faster pace of play. And we see in this graphic here some ways that they did that. So starting with the first one on the top left, you see 40 seconds, and it is recommended a player completes a stroke within 40 seconds once it's their time to play. So 40 seconds might not sound like a lot of time, but I guarantee you it's a little bit longer than you think it is. So I would challenge each of you to time your players and see how long it takes them to complete a shot. If they're at 30 seconds, they're right on the money, they're going to be just fine. But maybe you keep getting a player that's a minute, maybe over a minute with their setup. Maybe work with them and find a way to get them to complete their stroke faster. And some things can help them to prepare to make the shot when it's not their turn to play. So if someone else is playing first, go ahead and use your rangefinder, get the distance, figure out what the wind's doing. You can maybe even choose a couple clubs while someone else is playing. So once it's the player's turn, maybe they take a few practice swings, figure out what ball which club they want to use, and then they're ready to hit their ball. The next one is playing ready golf, and that's another thing that's encouraged by the rules. I know it's more natural to let the further player play first, and that's fine as long as everyone's kind of moving along at a good pace. But maybe there's a player who has a difficult shot or maybe needs a little bit more time to figure out what they want to do. Then I would say you encourage someone else in the group to play first. The other case where you might see this is maybe someone needs help with a ruling, and typically with that we would say everyone else in the group go ahead and play your shot and start walking up to your next shot or the green, wherever it is, while we get a rules official in here and get them straight away and get them caught up. The one on the bottom left, I wouldn't worry about too much. Max score was just another form of play that was implemented. It just essentially means the committee can create a max score. Maybe it's a triple bogey, maybe it's net double bogey, maybe it's just a number. But they can implement that, so if a player gets to that number, they just pick up and move on to the next hole. And then the last one there you see is the flag stick, which we know we can always leave the flag stick in the hole, and we've already discussed that. So another way to promote faster pace of play was by reducing the search time to 3 minutes. You might remember back when it used to be 5, and the reason why it was changed was the USGA found that if a player was going to find their ball, more than likely it would be found in the first 3 minutes of searching. This also leads to promoting players to play provisional balls, which is something I want to take a couple seconds to go through, since it's something we encourage all players to do. So if a ball might be lost outside of a penalty area, or maybe it's out of bounds, to help save time, players may play a provisional ball. they have to announce that they're going to play a provisional ball out loud, and it's highly encouraged and kind of required by the rules that they use the word provisional. So make sure they say, I'm going to hit a provisional ball, and it's helpful to also identify that ball so you know which one is the first one versus the provisional. If that original ball is found within 3 minutes, that provisional ball must be abandoned. So if you find that original ball and it's in a spot that's not so nice, and that provisional ball sitting over there in the middle of the fairway, unfortunately, if you find that ball within 3 minutes, you have to play the original ball. You can't switch to the provisional. But the provisional comes into play if the ball is not found within that 3-minute search, or if they find the ball out of bounds. Then that player is allowed to play that provisional ball under stroke and distance. So you just add that 1 stroke. All right, this next slide is about advice and help. So the rules allow a player to exchange advice with a caddy, and you see caddy is starred on this screen because there's a couple other people that can be put into that sentence. So you see down below, when we talk about caddies, we also could apply to partners caddies, and advice givers, which in this case are coaches. So take out caddy in that first sentence, and we'll read the sentence as coaches are not allowed to stand behind a player to help with alignment. The idea behind this is the player is required to act alone in making a stroke. So once a player starts to take their stance, which is defined as like having 1 foot in position, neither the caddy, partner, or coach can stand behind the player. Again, it should be the player's responsibility to set up for and make the shot on their own. So this eliminates that caddy, partner, or coach to check alignment, stance, or whatever else of a player before they actually make that stroke. If the player realizes that the caddy or coach or partner is still standing behind them when they begin to take their stance, they must step out of that stance, tell that person to move out of the way, and then begin that process again in order to avoid penalty. Otherwise, if they complete their stroke with that caddy, coach, partner standing behind them, it could be a 2-stroke penalty or a general penalty. All right, distance measuring devices. This is something that I'll touch on just super quick. Distance measuring devices are now allowed unless they aren't, whereas before this rule was reversed. So you no longer need to put distance measuring devices on a local rule sheet. They will always be allowed, but you know, like the USGA and professional US Open championships and PGA championships do have that local rule now that prohibit it. But I would say for all of your competitions, don't worry about putting anything about distance measuring devices since the rules now allow them to be used. All right, and another major theme we saw with the rules changes was reducing penalties for accidental acts or occurrences. So here in this picture, we see the player gets hit by the ball in motion on accident, and there's now no penalty. So there's no problem if a player, I most likely see it with a chip. If you chip a ball and it goes straight in the air and hits the player in the arm or something, no problem, no penalty. You're just going to play that ball where it lies. Essentially, if the ball is not going to go where the player intended it to, so they shouldn't be penalized further with any additional penalty strokes. And similar along the same lines, double hits. So if a player accidentally hits the ball more than once in a single stroke, there is no penalty and only 1 stroke counts. It doesn't matter how many times the player hit the ball. Again, this is accidental, so no trick shots here. A player can't pop it off the ground, hit it a few times, and then swing at it as hard as they can. This is talking about accidental double hits. Again, they play the ball where it's gonna end up. So no penalty strokes, you just count 1 stroke for the swing and play the ball where it lies. Again, the ball's probably not going to go where the player wanted it to, so there shouldn't be an additional penalty to it. Then this last one that they put in is probably my favorite rule change, and it's the no penalty for movement during search. So if a ball moves while you're searching for it, there's now no penalty. If you do step on a ball or maybe kick it or whatever, you're just going to replace the ball. And if you don't know exactly where it was, you're going to estimate that spot. Now, this doesn't mean that you get to put the ball on top of the fluffy grass and get a great lie. Chances are you didn't see the ball in the first place, which is why you were searching for it. So you have to recreate that lie in order to follow this rule correctly. So tuck it back in the grass where you think it was, and then move on. Again, no penalty for accidentally moving your ball during search. I know this comes in handy when we are playing in the fall, which is when I know your season usually is. So you don't have to pick up every leaf very carefully. You can go ahead and get in there and try to find the ball, and don't worry about moving it if you come across it. And with that, we are complete with our rules portion of the night. I do see some questions in here, Josh, if you want to go ahead and address some of those.
Sure. The first one regarding the playing out of turn or encouragement of playing when ready for pace of play, about just the safety and etiquette. Yeah, that is paramount. So the first thing is want to make sure it's safe, and then also practicing good etiquette. So, when it's reasonable to do so, we would encourage players to play out of turn because there's no penalty with safety and etiquette in mind. Now, it is going to depend on the caliber of player or players that are involved, for as far as walking ahead and how close they or far away they need to be to the landing area and so forth. But yeah, safety and etiquette is number one there. Next, about distance measuring devices that calculate slope. Are they still prohibited? Yes, you cannot use the slope feature, but you can use a distance measuring device that can calculate slope as long as you're not using it during the competition, which is different. It used to be that if it could measure slope, you couldn't have it out, period. But now, as long as that function is turned off, then you can use it as long as you're only measuring distance only. About coaches and caddies reading putts, I would send you to the VHSL handbook on that, because it depends, especially in the championships, on what coaches are and are not allowed to do, especially if the pace of play parameters are in effect and when the group's on the clock. So I'll just send you to the handbook for that. Next question that we will take right now. Do players that are using a rangefinder have to give the distances to other players? If asked, they don't have to. It's just kind of common courtesy or etiquette to do so. They don't. Again, they don't have to. That it's theirs, and they can choose not to. But it's an accepted way of doing so if only one has it in the group. And I think there's a few more that we might respond to privately, but as far as questions on those last particular topics, I think that does address it. Oh, one more that we talked about with this local rules and putting greens. Can a local rule allow for relief on a green? If it's ground under repair or something of that nature, the rules do cover that. But it would need to be outlined as far as what you're giving relief for and why, and just the different parameters on what the local rule is. Number one thing for local rules is that they need to be clear for everyone, so everyone reading that sheet can read it and interpret it the same way. Is the only advice that I would give. Going back to penalty areas, there was a question that was asked that we didn't get to. If you take relief from the penalty area and then you find your original ball, what do you do then? If you're virtually certain, if it's known or virtually certain that the ball's in the penalty area, and then you drop the ball under that rule, and that known or virtually certain is the term that's used on when you can take relief, then the dropped ball is now the ball that's in play, and the original ball is now abandoned. If you are not virtually certain and you just happen to drop a ball, then it changes, but we get a little bit into the weeds there. But the bottom line is, before you or your players do any action, really, they need to just step back and make sure they know what they're doing, and the implications of that action before doing so. So in this case, if the 3-minute search is not up, then I would advise to keep searching for that ball. But once you're known and virtually certain that it's in the penalty area and you drop the ball, then you have to move forward with that ball dropped under penalty of 1 stroke. They're coming in a little bit faster than I can keep up with, so there's one question about COVID concerns. I'll answer this and then ask Kelly Haney to speak more about COVID concerns, and then might be able to sort out some of these and answer a few more before we end the session. If a course is not providing rakes for bunkers due to COVID concerns, this is something that we had in our championships and qualifiers last season, especially early on when we got back going. We would encourage using a local rule to allow players to lift, clean, and place within. We either use a scorecard or a club length in the bunker. If the bunker doesn't have a rake in it and it's late in the day, then probably going to be disturbed or could end up in a bad lie. We would encourage a local rule, which is what we did when we could not use rakes. But as far as other kind of more global COVID concerns, I think Kelly was going to address some of those.
Josh, are you ready for me to take over?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay. I do want to circle. Thank you to Josh and Kent and Amanda. We greatly appreciate all the rules that you just went over. I think it's very helpful for our coaches, and it's nice for us to finally have a golf coaches rules clinic similar to what we do for all of our other sports. So thank you very much. I do want to circle back around to one piece, and that was the distance measuring device. In our handbook, we touch on the fact that yes, if someone asks you, you need to share the information for the distance that somebody that's in your group. And that just goes back to sportsmanship, remembering that we are education-based athletics, and we really need to concentrate on sportsmanship as well as the golf game. So yes, in our world, in the high school league, yes, please, you do need to share that information with the other people that are in your group if you are using a distance measurement device. So I do want to just touch on a few things that are COVID related. Your athletic directors have heard this day in and day out from our office for the last several months. And I know that some of this may sound absolutely ridiculous to you because you all have been playing golf, I'm sure, at your courses in your personal life, and you're not wearing masks. But in order for us to get approval from the governor's office and the Virginia Department of Health to play sports this year, we had to agree that all of our coaches would wear masks, even our coaches that are coaching outdoor sports, and they would wear them at all times. So if you're talking to your golfers and you're close to your golfers, you need to have a mask on. If you're walking the course, I would say you don't need to have your mask on, but because you're actively walking the course. But if you're anywhere within 6 feet of them, please have your masks on. And once you stop at the hole, pull your mask back up. Again, I know that may sound ridiculous since you've been playing golf probably all fall and last summer without a mask on, but we've had to concede to certain regulations to be able to get our sports played. A few things that we would suggest for coaches: to make sure you communicate your guidelines in a clear manner to your golfers and to their parents, what you expect, how, sanitizing pieces, the kids need to have control of their own golf clubs and not share golf clubs even in practice. They need to, if they drop their glove, they need to pick their glove up. Their teammate doesn't need to pick their glove up or their ball or anything. They need to not touch anybody else's equipment, period, this year. Coaches need to keep accurate records of who comes to practice and who, coaching wise and player wise, in case contact tracing information is needed by your school system. The other part of it is when you're practicing, we would suggest that you practice in pods. So if 2 or 3 of your athletes get COVID, it doesn't take your entire team down for the rest, for the year. The other thing is your athletic directors will have your mitigation plan that they had to submit to the school systems, and the school systems in turn had to submit to the Virginia Department of Health and the Virginia Department of Education. So they will have more specifics on how you have to handle COVID cases or contact tracing and that type of thing. Again, the student athletes need to be responsible for their own clubs, their own gloves, their own balls, all of that stuff. No sharing of clothing. I mean, these are what we think are common sense pieces, but again, their student athletes are going to need to hear it again from you. Hand sanitizer should be plentiful and used at contests and practices. The biggest thing that we think you need to really hit on with your parents and your kids is if any of them feel sick, they need to tell you immediately. If they feel sick during the day before practice or the night before, they don't need to come to practice. They don't need to come to the match. They need to be very honest with you. We've heard some situations where it's taken down basketball teams because a couple kids weren't honest that they weren't feeling well, and come to find out they had COVID and their entire team is quarantined for 2 weeks. I mean, that's a mess. We don't want that to happen. Things may change between now and the start of golf season, which, we hope and pray they do ease up a little bit and things get a little bit better, but we still have to take all these precautions. Social distancing measures should be in place at all practice areas, even if that is limited space. So you need to make sure that they're 6 feet apart in their in the practice areas. Really need to watch that. And kids need to be courteous and limit their time in the practice area so that everyone can use that warm-up area or whatever that they need. But the main thing is to make sure they're masked when they're not actively playing. When they're actively playing, they do not have to wear masks. Now, I will say that, and then I will also say that there are a few counties that are making their student athletes wear masks even during competition. So you will need to check with your athletic director to see what the policy is for your particular area. They need to bring their own water bottles. We don't need to be providing that kind of thing. Just really, they need to keep their own stuff and their own on themselves. For championships for golf, 1 team will qualify for the championships and 3 individuals per region. And then for girls, there will still be the zone qualifiers, but there will be no automatic qualifiers this year. We had to cut numbers for all of our participants in our championships. And golf is not singled out. All of our sports have had to cut their numbers for individual sports, and then for team sports, they all had to be cut as well. So just want to give everyone a heads up for that. The first day of practice is also your first tryout date. So that's the date that you can actually hold tryouts, which that date is February 15th. So please do not think that you can start your tryouts prior to February 15th. If you have any questions about mitigation strategies, there is a 51-page booklet that is on the VHSL website. It's on the main page. It covers all of our mitigation strategies from parents, spectators. You know, right now, the governor has said 2 spectators per participant for outdoor sports. If you have spectators, your athletic director is going to have to tell you how you can handle spectators or how that can be handled for your matches. So just be aware of that. That's something you're going to need to ask your athletic director of how that's going to be handled. But this booklet was put together with the governor's office and the Department of Health and Department of Education and several other entities in order for us to get approved to even play our high school sports. So a lot of hoops we had to jump through a lot of hoops. But anyway, you can find all of that information and it goes from head to toe. There is a section on golf. I pretty much just hit everything. Golf, we didn't put a whole lot in there because a lot of it will be up to the local golf courses of how they handle, you know, the rakes and the sticks and things like that. So want everybody to be aware of that as well. If you have any questions pertaining to the VHSL, please don't hesitate to email me or call me in the office. My email address is khaney@vhsl.org. So please feel free to give me a call, shoot me an email. My email address is on the VHSL website. It's easy to find. So any questions, be glad to help out. And then we'll go from there. Do we have any questions that I can't see, Amanda or Josh?
No, the ones that I saw you answered.
Okay, wonderful. Well, again, thank you all for joining the golf clinic. The list of schools that have completed the golf rules clinic will be posted, I would say by the end of the week, the week of February 12th. I believe that's a Friday. That list should be posted on the VHSL website so that the schools don't get fined for not attending the golf rules clinic. So you can look for it there.
Perfect. I think we have one more thing, Kelly, if
Okay.
you went through all your section.
Just one quick thing regarding, we just heard that your season's going to start pretty soon. We have a great junior golf circuit. It has about 90 tournaments that comprise of like 9, 18, 36-hole tournaments, player rankings, exemptions that go into championships, and really feel like this is your opportunity to get your kids out there and stay competitive. I know you would have been playing in the fall, and then you would have been, you know, utilizing the entire summer maybe to figure out your team, and this would have been a good way to keep them competitive. But this is an awesome opportunity that after your season, you know, introduce them to this. They are required to be a member of the junior golf circuit in order to compete in anything that's titled junior golf circuit. So, you know, we'll have these slides available, so you'll be able to get more information here, but feel free to give me a call or email me if you want any additional information about the junior golf circuit. I think that's all that we have, and I know that y'all are antsy to go, but do appreciate y'all taking the time to be a part of this, and that we can answer any questions for you.
Kelly, we did have one question come in that I believe pertains more to you, but it was asked, are we playing 9 or 18 holes? And what if dark doesn't allow us to finish? Is that something that you have a quick answer to? If not, I can give you the name and you can get back to them.
Yeah, that is up to your district and your region. So your district play those athletic directors meet about how they're going to handle the regular season, and they will have decided how those tournament or those matches look. So you'll get with your athletic director to find out whether they have decided a 9-hole day or an 18-hole day. We don't dictate that from our office.
All right.
Okay. Thank you. I hope you have a great season.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks all the coaches for attending, and we hope you guys got something out of it. Again, if any of your questions or if you think of anything, you can find all of our emails on our website as well. You can email us questions. We'll be glad to answer anything that you have.